I'm Mike Costello, and I'd like to talk to you in the next few minutes about a blueprint for dealing with life's problems. Problems are a reality for all of us. It doesn't matter who we are, it doesn't matter how much money we have, it doesn't matter how old we are, it doesn't matter any aspect of our life. No aspect of our life differentiates us or keeps us or insulates us from having problems. Problems and challenges are just a reality of being alive. And in some cases, they are the validation of the truth and the reality that we are alive. In New Thought metaphysical philosophy, we believe that problems and challenges come to bring us lessons, to allow us to grow as persons, and allow the reality of our being to be more fully expressed. We believe that the power and the presence of God is in the midst of every challenge and circumstance. And that's not to say that the power of God creates it or permits it or wills it. It simply means that the divine presence is in the midst of every circumstance and situation. Wherever you are in life, wherever I am in life, wherever any of us are in life, there is the presence of God, and that presence guides and directs us. And it is through our action, reaction, and response to problems and challenges that we're able to grow as persons, that we're able to learn what we need to learn, and that we're able to come to the point in life where we need to be. So no matter what you do, no matter how you try to avoid it, no matter what your planning of circumstance and situation may be, you and I will face challenges. And so since that is a reality of life, it is as real and as expected as breathing in and breathing out, we need to have a blueprint for dealing with problems and challenges. We need to have ways in which we can cope with this reality. And as we build our coping mechanism, we're then able to know that we can deal with each circumstance and situation in a positive and affirmative way. We begin by saying that we understand that the dynamic and the power of mind creates for all of us the ability to really live life, and that we live our lives through the dynamic of our mind. And the outer circumstances and situations, those things that come into our life, are simply things through which we process reality in our mind. And so we want to be always aware of the fact that the way our mind operates and the way we respond to circumstance and situation is tremendously important. So begin to understand, begin by accepting the truth that challenges and problems visit us all, and it doesn't matter who we are. Just know that they're coming. And since they're coming, we need to prepare for them. And so the next few minutes will be devoted to a method, not the only method, maybe not the best method, but one method for you to begin to deal with problems and challenges, and one that I found to be very successful, and one that in our church and our organization and in our philosophy we have subscribed to and found to help countless people in dealing with problems and circumstances and situations. Anytime we build anything, we need to have a plan. And so we talk about the fact that we need to have a blueprint for dealing with life's problems. And a blueprint is something that's laid out pretty clearly, very clearly, and that we're able to follow. And that as we follow the blueprint, we're able to construct something that brings into manifestation or reality a experience or a structure or some aspect of life that we want to make manifest and make real. We need to have a plan. We need to have a plan in our life for every circumstance and situation. So when a problem faces, or when you are faced with a problem, the real beginning point is to accept the fact that this is a problem. If you have limited resources or no resources and find yourself in financial crisis, that's where you are. If you are ill, you are ill. If you are depressed, you are depressed. Wherever you are in a problem, circumstance, and situation, that's where you are. And nothing is gained by denying it. So many people do move through the process of denial, and we know that the process of denial can create not only psychological and mental problems, emotional problems, but we know it can also create physical problems as well. So denial is not the answer. Acceptance is the answer. Submission is the answer. And there's a tremendous difference between giving in and giving up. And we need to talk about that right at the beginning of dealing with problems. When we give up, we fold our hands and we say, isn't it awful? And we begin to have a little pity party, as some people say. And we begin to move into a feeling of being defeated and overcome by the problem or challenge. So we're not talking about that at all. But what we are talking, we're not talking about giving up, but we're talking about giving in. And as we give in to a circumstance or situation, we're able to identify it and acknowledge it as a reality. It doesn't mean that it's a reality that has to be the way that it is forever, but it does mean that it is where we are at the point in time where we find ourselves, and it is the beginning point to solving the problem, dealing with the challenge, growing from the experience, and moving on, which is really what we have to do in all of these circumstances. So we need the blueprint, and we need to identify and accept the point where we are, that we have the problem, that we have the challenge. If the relationship is over, if the job is gone, whatever it is, that's where you are. And so now what do you do? And the idea at this point, or the need at this point, is to develop the blueprint or develop the plan. What is the need? What is your want and what is your desire? What is your want and desire out of this problem? How is it that you want to see it end? Where is it that you want it to take you? And a good point at this, or a good thing to do at this point, is to literally write it down. Write down what it is you want this challenge or this problem to, how it is you want it to be resolved. If you've lost a job, maybe you want another job. Maybe you want a different job. Write it down. If a relationship has ended, don't concern yourself at this point in time with analyzing the problem, but instead look at what it is you want out of this problem in the process of solution. Open yourself to guidance. That means to listen to people. It means, from our perspective, and we believe firmly in this, that you need to go into quiet and silent times, that you need to enter into times of meditation. You need to enter into times of reflection, not seeking a solution, but simply quieting yourself, bringing your mind and your consciousness and your spirit into a place of serenity. Let go of the circumstance and situation and be open to guidance and direction. In New Thought metaphysical philosophy, we believe that through meditation and prayer, we open ourselves to the presence and the power of divine mind, the mind of God, the presence of God. It doesn't matter what your religious belief is. It doesn't matter whether you have any. It doesn't matter what faith tradition you come from. It doesn't even matter whether you want to believe in God. Connect and open yourself to the reality of guidance and direction. But if you are a person who can open to spiritual realities and truths, open yourself to the divine presence entering into your heart and your mind. Don't expect it to do anything. Don't ask it to do anything. Simply let it be there and understand and realize that that presence can guide, can direct, and will unite with your mind to bring you guidance and direction in this circumstance and situation. Understand that in every problem and challenge, changes are going to be necessary. Changes in the way you think, changes in the way you feel, changes in the way you behave, changes in the way you speak, changes in the response and reaction that you have. You must change. Each of us must change in the midst of a challenge or a problem. And as we open ourselves to change, then that guidance can bring us to where we need to be. And as that guidance brings us into a process of change of thought, change of action, change of reaction, we begin to lay out the blueprint of what it is we need to do. Next, it's tremendously important to have the awareness that good can and will come out of every experience. That's very hard when something has happened that's devastating. That's very hard when we've lost someone we love. That's very hard when depression is coming into our consciousness and our mind. But in the midst of those times, those are the very times when we need to grasp hold of the reality and the truth that good can and will come to me. Because when we begin that process, we begin the process of hope, we begin the process of expectation, we begin the process of transformation, we begin to open the door to a solution, to guidance, and to direction. Prepare your mind and your heart for the reality that this experience has come to teach a lesson and to bring you something, even if it brings you something in the midst of tears and suffering. And allow your mind to be centered in the presence of expecting good and connecting with the divine, because that expectation of good and that connection with the divine will bring about your mind and heart's transformation. The next thing that we do in creating this blueprint might be something that you would never imagine. or never think about, but it's very, very important in moving in positive ways to solve problems and deal with challenges. And that is to give thanks in advance for the answer or the solution that's going to come. Give thanks in advance. That means to have a thankful heart even before we see the problem being solved. We see this in divine and spiritual healing all of the time. And any spiritual healer will tell you that as we pray and as we lay hands and as we do the things that we do for a physical healing, we are giving thanks in advance for that which hasn't taken place in our sight yet, but that we know will come to pass. And if we know that this universe is good, that the presence and power of God is accessible to all of us, that the positive aspirations of our heart and mind are always at the center and core of all that we do, then we know that we can give thanks in advance because all things, as Paul said, are working together for good. It may not appear so, but it is so. And the giving of thanks in advance is tremendously important to opening ourselves to the answers, the guidance, the direction that we need in times of difficulty. Next, we need to release the situation and let go. A good example of this is that so often we spend time agonizing over how we're going to solve a circumstance or situation or a problem. And really what we need to do is to step out of the situation and go do something else. Maybe you need to take a drive or take a walk, take a little trip, move into an extra moment of silence in the day. Do something that moves you away from the problem itself. The key is to go back to it at a point in time. But there needs to be this time of respite, this time of going away and stepping out. All of us know that we get our best ideas, we get the solutions and the guidance that we need when we're open and receptive, but not necessarily when we're seeking, not necessarily when we're looking for it. I get great ideas in the shower. Other people, I've had great ideas washing dishes or cleaning the floor or getting the car washed. When we're doing other things that occupy our heart and mind, we are then open and receptive to the solutions, to the ideas that we need to have. That's when the divine comes through. That's when the good comes through. But we have to get out of the way. We have to allow our negativity to get out of the way. We have to allow our negative thought processes to step aside. And so it's tremendously important that we release any situation and that we let go. And the last and most important thing to do is to be open to change and to accept the reality that a solution for the challenge or problem will come. It may not come in your time. It may not come today or tomorrow. It may not be on our time schedule, but it will come. And if we persevere patiently, and if we cultivate the dynamic of our heart and mind, and if we open ourselves to guidance, and if we look for good and only good, and if we know that the good in life can and will come to us, and if we prepare our hearts and minds for that, then magnificent and wonderful things will happen to us. We're talking about changing the way that we think. We're talking about changing the way that we think in order to change the quality of our life. We're saying that as we change the way that we think about problems and difficulties and challenges, we can open ourselves to the solutions, to the guidance, and the direction that we all need, want, and seek to be the strong, empowered, prosperous, successful, healthy, dynamic people that we were created to be. And it begins with a blueprint in your life for dealing with problems and the understanding and realization that problems are going to come, and every problem and challenge creates an opportunity to learn a lesson, to grow, to go through, and to be strengthened and empowered through the process. We believe in prayer and meditation as centering forces. We'd like to invite you at this point in the program to pause for a moment of reflection with us. Eternal and loving God, we give you thanks for the presence and power that you are in our lives. We open ourselves to the truth that in the midst of every problem and challenge, you are there with your guidance and direction, bringing us peace, harmony, and perfect balance in every circumstance and situation. We open our hearts and minds to the solutions to all of our problems. We do this in the name of faith, in the name of hope, in the name of love. Amen.
We would like to give you the opportunity to explore and discover in your own home the new thought teachings that this program is sharing with you by sending you a free copy of one of these booklets. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807. Whatever your dream, whatever your vision, You can reach it through confident living.
Those were very powerful suggestions on creating a blueprint for our lives. And I think the most important or the most pertinent was that we need to step aside and let go and let God. And I liked that a lot, that part of it, because if we put ourselves so forcefully in the forefront, then we're just going to be doing that. We're not going to be receiving. But as you said, then we receive when we step aside.
Absolutely. It's tremendously important. But the other thing that we need to add to the letting go and letting God is that we have to, after we let go and let God, as I said in the talk, come back to the problem and act. And I think that's where many good intentioned people miss out because, in traditional thought, we're taught, or traditional Christian teaching in many cases, we're taught just leave it to God, put it in God's hands, and everything will come out all right. And we certainly believe that everything will come out all right. But we also believe that God has some expectation of us and that there isn't this ability necessarily to just turn it over. There's the ability to turn it over. And certainly we do need to let go and we need to let God guide and direct us. But then once we get that guidance and direction, then we need to act and respond. So
Yeah.
many times I've talked to people, as I'm sure you have, who have had different challenges, and I think often of one of the most common is financial. And people will come and they'll say, I've got this problem or that problem. It has to do with my prosperity. And of course, a good deal of metaphysical and New Thought philosophy is based on prosperity teaching. And so people will say, well, I've done the affirmations, I've prayed, I've let go and I've let God, but I still don't have the new car, and I still don't have the job, and I still don't have the house or the apartment. And my response to that is, well, God is working through you, but what is it that God told you to do to get the house or the car or whatever? Because there is the need for us to do something and for us to be participants with God. And one of the things that we say in our metaphysical Bible interpretation class is that God created the earth in Genesis and created us, and then he was done. And so he's finished at this point. His law and presence and power is there, but the work is for us to do. But we do need to detach from the problem and not be in the midst of it, because if we don't detach, as you were alluding, then we stay in that problem, and that's horrible, and then it gets worse.
So when we detach, we're able to see clearly. Then we're able to see what it is we need to do, and our God-inspired thoughts then are able to lead us into a new path, a new way of doing.
That's true. One example that I've given before is that when we're in a problem, we're in the midst of a problem, and I think I've given a couple of series of talks on this topic, but I haven't for a long time, but I think I will this year again, is detach and rise. So there's the need to detach from our problem, rise above it, which means unite with the presence of God, rise above it, and be bigger than the problem, and give it up to God, and then relax and repose, which is that time of going away from it. And then once we're refreshed and we've been guided and directed in what it is we need to do, then go back and become one with it. And so this constant detach and rise is an important process, but we have to come back until the end of life. And of course, that's what resurrection is all about. The end of life is, and then at the end, we will rise eternally. But for most of us, at least those of us who aren't passing into spirit today or tomorrow, it's important for us to get back into the midst of life. And
What I hear you saying is we have to assume self-responsibility. We have to be responsible for our own lives and for what we do and don't do, and for the guidance we receive to proceed forth with that guidance and use it in our lives.
don't you find that people are so reluctant, or in many times, not reluctant necessarily, but they often fail uh, to seek guidance, to be open to guidance, and then fail to act or respond or act upon that guidance?
Yes, they expect God to do everything for them. They say, as you said earlier, they'll say, well, I've done this, and I've done this, and I've done this. But they've just been asking. They've not been receiving and then acting on what they received. That would be, of course, the important part, that we listen. And as we always say, prayer is talking to God, that's asking. And then meditation is listening. We listen to what the response is. Then we have to be responsible. That's the self-responsibility to do whatever it is that has to be done. And also allow other people to work in our lives in a way, because because very often we cut off our own good by rejecting the help of others, whether it's just words or tangible help.
And that listening, I think, for those of us from Western traditions is so hard, isn't it? For us
Isn't it?
to listen. We always feel we have to, if we're praying, we're pleading or we're asking for something, but simply to be in the silence. And I think when we're troubled or have problems or challenges, it is doubly difficult to enter the silence and go into quiet meditation. But it's a wonderful and very necessary aspect, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And it's hard for us to think that God is truly giving us direction, but that's what our faith is, that God will give us that direction. And we should never expect God to do it for us, because that's not the way it works. As you said earlier, it's not the way life is. We're here to work through our problems, to work through whatever we need to do with whatever we're faced in life, and we're all faced with various problems. But we can always have help. We can always have that wonderful assistance. But it's up to us to do it.
And as we do it, then we overcome one problem, and then more will come because that's what life is about. And what metaphysical teaching so often tells us is that, and we have said this before, and it's not unique to us, is that life is the school of the soul,
Yes.
and that life through our problems and challenges is such an eloquent teacher of the lessons that we need to learn.
Yes, and as we discern what our blueprint needs to be, it's important that we accept that, yes, change is inevitable, because that's, I think, the hook that gets everyone, don't you? It's like we don't want to accept change. We don't want to face change, and we're fearful of change. So if we know that change is inevitable and we welcome change, then it makes life far more joyous.
But that's a difficult lesson. And of course, what we talk about is learning the lessons and coming to be proficient at the lessons we need to learn. And that's certainly one of them, isn't
Yes,
it?
yes, and there are some people who really welcome change more than others, and we can take lessons from those who do, and we can look at them as an inspiration that, yes, they've had lots of changes in their lives, but they've bounced back or pulled themselves up by their bootstraps or whatever the case may be. But they accept that change is inevitable, and they accept that change is good. And it is good. All change is good,
All
because
change.
it's according to how we treat it as to whether or not it's negative or positive.
Right. And the challenges of life and the problems of life do indeed bring us the lessons that we need. And even though we are participants in creating them in a way, it is not to say that we can analyze. And I see many people that want to do that. They want to understand why it is, which is no different than a traditionalist saying, well, why is this happening? Or giving it off to the will of God, which is even more fearful.
Yes.
From our perspective, because we believe the will of God is constant and never changing and always good.
Yes.
But that people have great difficulty with that, don't they?
Yes, they do. But if we could follow the blueprint suggestions you just made, it would be easier, because then we would know that we have control of our lives, that we're creating that blueprint. And through the help of from those on the inner planes of being, then we are personally creating the blueprint, and it's up to us to live up to it and to face the changes that will naturally ensue. And so as we do that, we can be more love-filled, light-filled, and an inspiration for others, because we show our faith, and we show that we're following that blueprint, but not to a T, but comfortably and happily.
And that's not to say at all that we diminish the position of God, does
Yeah,
it? You know, I'm kind of
exactly.
amazed when we talk again to people from traditional backgrounds. Very often, their unhappiness with us is the fact that we put such emphasis upon personal responsibility. And often, what is said to me by other clergymen in from traditional backgrounds is that, well, you really are pushing God out of it, and you're more humanist than you are spiritual. But we are spiritual humanists in that we believe completely that it doesn't diminish God's role or power because we don't give it over and expect God to do it for us, but it really strengthens the reality of God in the fact that that presence and power can bring us newness of life.
Indeed, because if we didn't look to God as the divine resource for all, divine creator and resource for all that is, then we wouldn't be able to create our blueprints. We wouldn't be able to follow them. We wouldn't be able to accept change. We wouldn't be able to do what we do. But with that faith uppermost in our consciousness, we can do anything. With God, all things are possible. So those people who might criticize us in that way are really short-sighted, aren't they?
They are, and they are also the same kind of people who say that there is some noble good in suffering or in poverty or in limit or lack or being in the midst of disease, when in fact we don't believe that at all. We believe that God wants to bring us out of those experiences. And so what we need to do is share with our brothers and sisters and those around us the ability that we have to get out of those circumstances rather than simply being in them and explaining some spiritual value to
Exactly.
that negative experience.
Yes, because who wants to stay bogged down for a lifetime or even more than a day? But we also need to help others, as you just said, to help lift others. And when we do, again, we're exhibiting our faith in God because we're saying there's a power greater than us, there's a power greater than that other person who's troubled. And if they look to God for help, they will receive the inspiration and they'll receive then the strength to do what they're inspired to do.
But they must do.
Yes,
We must do. And
exactly.
that's key. And we can't just fold our hands. That's the difference going back to giving up and giving in. If we
Yes.
give up and say, God, do it, what we do is we give in and let God guide us.
Yes, and we can't do that because God is love and God is all good. And it's all there all the time anyway. God is ever present in every aspect. So it's up to us to grasp or to ignore, isn't it?
It's up to us to claim the presence of God, which is always in our midst.
Yes.
And so we're never without that guidance and direction. And we're always uplifted and supported in every circumstance and situation. Dr. Freelander and I have been sharing with you concepts and ideas for your blueprint to dealing with life's problems and challenges. We hope that you found this information useful. We look forward to seeing you next time.
This program is a community outreach of Christ Church. Dr. Mike Costello speaks each Sunday morning at 11 a.m., and Dr. Iris Freelander speaks on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. at the church. On Sunday evenings at 6 p.m., there is a meditation and healing service. Come and join us. You will be warmly welcomed.